The She Sells, He Sells podcast, where we are here to change the way you think about sales by getting you to look at it in a whole new way. And I'm really excited to be joined today by Holly Haynes. Welcome, Holly.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so
Yes,
excited to
Holly
be
is
here.
a fantastic podcast host of the Crush the Rush podcast. And we'll talk a bit about that and specifically the title, because I'm all about crushing the rush of anything at this stage of my life. But as we always do, we're going to start with a fun fact before we get into Holly and her story. So, Holly, you said you have an unnatural fear of one animal, same animal as Brian,
Yeah.
and that animal is snakes. So tell us more.
I don't really know where it came from. They just freak me out. Like, I will have dreams about that. Like, it's just a whole thing. And I have two girls who are 11, they're twins, and I don't want them to have that fear. So, like, as kids, when they were like babies, we would take them to the zoo, and I would just tell my husband, I'm like, just take them in the reptile room. I mean, I will not go. There's no way. I don't even want to be close to it. But we were joking before we started recording. We went to Costa Rica in January, and there are lizards and snakes everywhere. And I was like, I almost didn't want to go because I was so afraid of these like reptiles everywhere. And this, I'm not as afraid of what do you call it? They're like the big kimono dragon type things that are all over Costa Rica. They're just like huge lizards. I don't know what the real name is. But in the resort that we were staying in, they swim
The lizards
in the pool. Yeah, the lizard is like it's huge, like a large lizard. I mean, not as big as an alligator, but like a cat, like the size of a cat. And it would like jump in the pool and swim, and I was like, oh my god. So I do think being around that like helped me a little bit. But we went hiking in the rainforest, and one of the things they tell you, and I was like, I can't go. But then it's like you travel all this way, like you have to go. And I was like, I have to be a good example. Like I have to do this. There are poisonous snakes in the rainforest, and they're actually very beautiful. I feel like it helped me a little bit because they're not like in Ohio, they're like brown and nasty looking, but in Costa Rica, they're like bright green or red. And so the tour guide, of course, is like pointing them out. And I was like, can we just take a break? Okay. Like, I don't want to see that. Like, if the tour guide didn't point them out, I wouldn't have seen them, which would have been fine. I do feel like it was important that we saw them, but so I have these like pictures of snakes in my phone because I wouldn't take a picture of it, and I made the tour guide do it. So we have it, but I don't know. We're working on it.
You took some big steps in facing your fear.
A little. I felt like I had to because I didn't want to like pass it on to my girls. Like I feel like I wanted them to like not have the fear of it.
I feel that. So I have like the same thing with birds, which birds are everywhere, and I don't mind birds obviously far away from me, but there's something about the birds getting close to me with their wings, and it is this. It's like primal. Like I can't describe it. When we go to New York City a lot, and pigeons everywhere, and when they fly up around me, it's just a scream comes out. I try not to scream, but it just happens. So I feel you on the snakes. Yeah, it's intense.
Yeah, it's just a lot.
Well, we're not here to talk about snakes, although we probably could go back and forth about our weird animal fears. But I do want to talk about your entire business journey. You've built a really impressive business, and you and I connected recently because we are in the Mixer Mind. So we are in a kind of like part mastermind, part networking group, I would say. Holly and I are in a smaller pod. Yeah. I feel like I connected with you right away because our philosophy on business and family is so aligned. And I know for you, a big part of that is really divorcing yourself from the idea that you need to play the social media hamster wheel to get ahead in business. And I have so many things I want to talk to you about, but I want to start there because many of our listeners and my Acorn students feel this, and myself even feel this so deeply. We are told that in order to grow a profitable business, we need social media. It is a free marketing channel. And I want to hear your take on it. You feel so strongly about it that you have a program that is actually called the Anti-Social School. So talk to me about all of this. Do we need social media? Why or why not?
Well, I'll tell you a fun fact. Anti-Social School actually came out of the Taylor Swift song called Anti-Hero because it came out at the same time. And I was like, oh, this is such a fun play on words. and it makes people pay attention. You don't, and that's my point. I want you to pay attention. But for me, because I started in corporate, and at the time, so this was in 2020, I mean, we were being taught, like, you should post on Facebook 10 times a day. You need to be on story. You should post 50 stories a day. And I'm like, I report to the C-suite, and I'm not saying that because it was like, oh, this big important job, but I didn't have time to post on social. Like, it just wasn't in the cards. And so I had to, like, kind of flip the model really early on and figure out, I know that I need to be visible. I know I need to have people pay attention to what we're doing, but I'm going to have to do it in a different way because I also have young kids and I have a family and I'm working full time and I'm, we don't have a lot of time, but I could not, like, create that much content, and I just couldn't be on social. One, I had to be really careful about what I was sharing and how I was sharing it because of my job, but also, like, I was like, what do you want me to, like, run to the bathroom at 10 a.m. and, like, hide in the stall and try to post because it's, like, the best time? And so the model really came from like necessity. Like, I just had to think of a different way to do it. So that's kind of where that came from. But then my goal was actually never to leave my corporate job, but things progressed more quickly than I thought. And I was like, if I have the opportunity to leave my corporate job, there is no way that I'm going to change that schedule to come sit at home in front of Zoom all day. There's no way. And so I was just really, really intentional about building a business model that did not rely with me being on my phone, because if I did leave corporate, I wanted to pick my girls up from school. I wanted to take them to dance at the 3:00 class instead of the 7:00 class. Like, I wanted it to be this, like, big family change. And so that's really where the model came from. It wasn't because I don't like social or I don't think it's a good tool. I do think it's a good tool. I think it depends on what you want your business model to look like. And so we've structured it in a way now where I call it, like, the sidecar. It's like the second act. It's plan B. So if you go look at my social and you're on my email list, like, you will recognize every single thing. Or if you listen to my podcast, like, it is all repurposed and it always comes last. So if I have time and I'm excited about it, I'll use it. And if I don't, then it doesn't impact our business model at all.
Which is such an important point, that last one, that it doesn't impact your business model if you're not using it. I love using social media. I find it to be a great creative outlet, but so much of that depends on my energy and where I'm at and what's happening in my personal life and, even business life, like how busy I am. And the idea of when I'm on and it's great. That's amazing. But when I'm off and I don't post, it does feel like, well, gosh, are things going to fall apart? You're not getting paid. So I really love that idea. So it was born out of necessity. So can you talk to us a little bit about, like, if you're not using social, then what are you using? How are you bringing in new clients?
Yeah. So I actually just made a very sophisticated chart for a workshop that I did, but my husband and I, like, literally yesterday just went through all of our data to answer this question. And it's kind of twofold. So the way that we actually make money and sell is 70% through email. So email is really big for us. The rest comes from affiliates. So having really strong partners and relationships, or sometimes selling other people's things, like if it's a good fit, and referrals. So it's a very organic, grassroots kind of marketing system. But, the question is, well, how do you get people actually on your email list? Because we were talking about launching before we started recording, and it's like, you can launch whatever you want and it could be really amazing or it could not be, but you have to have somebody to talk to, right? So the way that I do that is a mix. For my personal story, it was through podcasting. And so I started a podcast, which did really well. I think it's a mix of the topic and also the timing, because it came out before the pandemic started. But also, I had this goal that was the one thing that I was going to go all in on. And I spoke, it was like a year and a half ago, almost 2 years, on 300 podcasts in 1 year. Now, that's not my recommendation. So if you're listening, you're like, I don't have a podcast or I don't want to do that. You don't have to. But the method is, like, pick the thing that you like to do and where your people hang out. And for me, it was like, I can control that. It's on my schedule. I was very strategic about what I talked about and how I introduced myself and where I was pointing people to. So they all went back to my email list. And that's, like, all I did for a year. I don't think that I would do it again because I think it's like less volume and, you could probably get the same results without having to do as much. But I think public speaking and speaking in groups, whether it's like a local networking group or a podcast or, any place where there's multiple people is a really, really solid plan. And I think people underestimate it because they're like, well, it's not that big of a group. And I was like, well, what if you talk to 5 people and you like change their perspective on something and then a month later 2 of them hire you? Like, to me, that is worth your time. So a lot of like speaking and podcasting, we dug really deep into SEO. So I have a couple of blog posts, and I know this sounds like, I don't know, like a 1990s strategy, but SEO is really powerful right now. And it's not that hard because of AI. So you could very simply pull up ChatGPT to, ask it about a topic that you're talking about and ask it for the key search terms that people are looking for. And you could very easily build an SEO strategy. That's the super easy way to do it. But it's more of a long-term approach. This is not like a quick fix. I'm going to get 5,000 people on my email list over time kind of thing. The other thing that I really leaned into the last year was thinking about what I call lookalike audiences and super simple lead magnet swaps. And I know it sounds like so basic, but I could do a lead magnet swap that's somebody that's like really aligned with my audience and get like 300 people on my list. Really, really easy. So I try really hard every week to have at least one client attraction strategy that I'm leaning into that's organic. So it could be podcasting, it could be looking at SEO, it could be strategic partnerships. There's just so many cool things that you can do when you have a conversation. And I'll give you one of the things that I've talked about quite a bit, and that is when you're talking with somebody at the end of the conversation, just ask like, "Hey, how can I help you?" Like whether it's a coffee chat or a podcast conversation, and most of the time it turns into something eventually. And so I've just been really, really dialed in to that. We also send emails quite a bit. So I send 3 emails a week. I will tell you when you subscribe to my email list, like what that looks like. And we have a really specific email strategy that we follow. So I send a newsletter every Friday. It's like a little more personal. So it'll tell you like my girls and I are watching the Flip Off. It's like a decorating show, or like we went to a crystal store. Like, so I'll tell you like real life things. And then we'll do things called hand raisers, which are just asking questions. And so I sort of make my email list like a community where I'm the one responding back. I'm the one that's asking questions. And then we like to highlight something once a week. So it might be a client, it might be a lead magnet swap, but we've got this strategy in place where I'm constantly like having conversations, and then the nurturing part sort of happens in my back end.
That was like a case study in how to do it.
I really like case studies. I can give you
we're
more.
going to dive into some of that. So the big thing, that the overarching thing in what you're saying and what I know about you is connecting with people. And so when you immediately would say 300 podcasts, it's on 300 podcasts in a year, I think a listener's mind is like, gosh, you must have pitched so many people. And then, but what I know of you is you're a very like down to earth person. You're just like a real, there's no false pretenses about you. And so that little tidbit that you said about having conversations and then at the end, like, hey, how can I help you? Because the natural inclination of someone who's asked that question is then, how can I help you? It creates this really beautiful collaboration. So let's go back to that 300 podcast episodes in 1 year. What did that look like? I mean, I would imagine there's some pitching going on in that.
Yeah. There was. And I think it's like anything. I think at the beginning, and I'll just be honest, it's harder. It's harder at the beginning. You're building the foundation, you're building the network, you're building everything. And so at the beginning, it was a lot of pitching. I had a goal to pitch 5 podcasts a week. So I always try to track the actions instead of the outcome, because then it just makes me feel like I'm making progress. Especially when you will get no's, and it does take like a minute to sort of process that. But what I found happen is once I sort of got the ball rolling, they started coming back to me. So it was less pitching and more just connecting and being really strategic and intentional about how I was presenting myself and what I was asking. So at the end of a podcast interview, I would be like, hey, do you know anyone else that would like really love this topic? I was also really strategic about the topics that I teach, and I still do this today, and I teach it in antisocial school, is I typically have 3 or 4 topics that I rotate through. So I'm not having to prepare ahead of time. I have lead magnets at the end that I will share and will, people can learn more about it. And so I was really intentional about the conversations. It was a heavier lift at the beginning, but I feel like at the end they just kind of came magically, which is not a strategy, but it kind of is, because it's just people are listening, and then they'll like reach out to you and say, oh, I love this. Would you like to be on this? And then from our podcast, we built out a little bit of a workflow so that after we interview somebody, I'll ask them like, hey, do you know anyone that you think would be a great guest on our podcast? And so we've sort of created this like networking engine, which kind of runs itself now, which I hate when people say that, because it's like, well, that's great. But the work at the beginning was a bit of a lift, and then I feel like it
and then you get to be a real person.
Now.
Yeah. So, that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
To be like totally transparent and honest, networking is not my strong suit, because and it's kind of like interesting because I'm all about sell without feeling sleazy, and networking to me, so much of that comes back to this like rubbing shoulders and good old boys, or it's a very, it can have a really gross connotation. And so what I love about hearing you say this is that is not your vibe at all. And so, but you do have to get started. Like, you have to pitch yourself, you have to get started, and then you just get to be a real human being. Also, back to the email part of what you'd said, 3 emails a week. I want to talk about that, because I have a lot of clients that even feel bad about coming into inboxes once a week. So 3 emails a week. But before that, before we get to that, what you talked about with the hand raiser emails. So you're literally using this email marketing engine, which is, one to many, to then have one-on-one conversations, right? Can you tell me what a hand raiser email looks or sounds like?
Yeah. So think of the hand raiser email as like the word on Instagram. So when somebody will be like, comment more if you want 17 recipes that have high protein, or whatever the thing is. So I'm just doing it in email, because if you think about it, the reason why it works is people are busy. They don't want to respond like a really long thing. They probably are questioning if you're even behind the scenes answering it. And so a lot of times I'll give something, like I'll talk about something educational or something that's worked in our business. So I always like to make sure that there's value there. But then it's like, hey, I'm a real person. If you have questions about this, comment more, and I'll share a little bit more behind the scenes. Typically, the response is just more questions, and we're just now having a conversation. It's not this like automated, here's the link to click on something. And I have just found, again, that like prioritizing the conversations has helped with sales longer term, but also just relationships. And I think, in the world that we're in today, whatever 2025 is, people are prioritizing the human piece of it. Like, they want to make sure that they're getting you, and that you're a real person, and you're the one that's answering the questions. And so I feel like it's just a way to build trust. And it's, you don't get a ton of responses, because I think it's different. And people are like, wait, what? Right. She wants me to respond to an email? But when you do, it's really nice, and you get to know people on your list just like you would inside social, but it's like on your time that you can answer it.
I think it's brilliant, and it's marrying those two things, that one to many that we know we need and works, with that one-to-one. And I am a firm, staunch believer that in 2025, you can't do one or the other. You need to do both. One-on-one is preferable, but it's not as scalable. You can't really just sit and hide behind your funnel and imagine it's going to run on autopilot and the sales are just going to continue to roll in. It'll work a little bit, but you have to have these conversations for sure. Let's talk about the 3 emails.
Yeah.
How did you work up to 3 emails a week? Are you talk to me about that?
Yeah. Well, first I'll just share, I am actually more of an introvert than I am an extrovert. So for me, having conversations and speaking, like I have to really protect my boundaries with it a little bit. So I hear you and feel you if you're like, oh my gosh, she wants me to talk to more people, which is where the email is actually nice because, it's not maybe live yet. So the 3 emails, I was just noticing that I wasn't getting the engagement on email that I thought that I would be getting. Cause I mean, we were sending emails because we're not, we are on social, but that's not our driver. And I was just like, I have to change something. Like something has to change. And so I studied real life, different businesses and entrepreneurs. And I looked at what they were sending. I actually have a folder in my Gmail and it's like great emails. And when I get one, I'll put it in there. And I started to just look at like, okay, like what are the emails that I really like to get? And what are the emails that like I'm responding to? And so I sort of just noticed this trend of I love a good newsletter. I want to know like what markers you're buying your kids. I want to know what you're listening to. I love reality shows. And so I knew that I was going to do that because it just felt fun and like a way to be more personal. And then I knew that I needed to highlight more of what we did. So I knew that I needed some sort of not necessarily a sales email, but we needed to talk about what we were doing. And so that sort of is like our midweek email where I'm either highlighting like a client story or a testimonial or something that leads to something. And then the last one was honestly just me paying attention to different trends and was like, how can I actually get people to respond to me? Because I will respond to an email way quicker than I will respond to a DM. And so it's almost like, how can I train my list that they can respond, especially if they're really interested, but also provide value. So usually on Sunday or Monday, we'll send an email out. Sometimes it's our podcast episode. It's usually something educational. And then there'll be a question of like, I would love to know, what does this look like in your business? Or can you take a break off social? Take a break for 48 hours. We just did this on our podcast. Take a break for 48 hours and then respond back to me how you felt. Or it'll be something completely different. Like I was asking, we're going on vacation to Sedona. And so I'll be like, PS, like I'm searching for different things to do with our family in Sedona. I'd love to know. And so it's just like a way where people are reminded that you're a person and it is a funnel, but it's not as automated as maybe they think.
So did you start when you started your email marketing, did you start with 1 email a week and work up to 3, or did you just go to 3 right off the bat?
Yeah. So for the most part, I was doing 1 a week because I feel like that's what you hear. And then we started adding in like a email that was just sort of repurposing our podcast episode, which did okay. But I don't know, it felt boring to me. And I was like, I don't know if I'm bored reading it, then I feel like my audience might be. And so we started this a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago. And the first year that we did it, increased our revenue by 50%. So now I am like, I will forever send 3 emails a week. And we do not have a large list. I mean, I know I've shared this like in the Mixermind, the group that we're in, but it's small compared to like big entrepreneurs, but it is like mighty. And I think that it is that way because we're building relationships inside this little email community.
I'm starting 3 emails a week. I mean, that's all I need to hear. 50.
I tell my clients that they get this look on their face like, you want me to do what? And I was like, can you just do it for 3 months and then come back to me and tell me? And now they have to be different and you can follow the formula I just gave you, but you'll get unsubscribes. We get unsubscribes. It's fine. But I get a lot of responses now when people reply. And the cool thing is when we do launches, like we're in the middle of a launch right now, people know it's coming because I've talked about it in like a client testimonial or, hey, I'm working on this launch. I also have 17 dance classes with my girls. Like I'll share that in our newsletter. And so people know that that's coming and it's not as a shock to the system when you start getting a million launch emails.
And then obviously when you're in a launch, you're sending 1 or 2 a day, and then close card day, there's multiples, I'm sure. So just to recap for everyone listening, because I know there's always the fear of I'm going to clutter someone's inbox. I am going to make people so annoyed by me, even if the content is good. Did you have that fear at all, Holly? And if you did, how did you work through that?
I mean, I kind of want to say that I didn't because I was like, I don't want to be on social, so we're just going to try it. And if it doesn't work, then I'll go back to what we were doing. Also, I would argue that if you looked at most large businesses, I always use Old Navy as an example. They're a product-based business, but it works for any business. How many emails are they sending a day? And I still subscribe because I want to know when they have a sale. And so my theory is like you're building super fans, and it's like a reality show. They want to know what you're doing. But also we've strategically put in, and this is like an advanced sort of method. Like if we're in the middle of a launch, we'll be like, hey, if you don't want to get these launch emails, like just click here and we'll keep you out of them. Or, hey, if you don't want to get these like weekly, I think I do call them hand raiser emails, then click here and I won't send them to you. Or if you don't want a podcast reminder. So we kind of give people options to choose their own path. But at the beginning, I just started sending them.
It's back to that business owner posture. Like we have to step into we are running a business, and how does a business operate? This is how businesses operate. They send email marketing, and it's not personal if someone unsubscribes. It's that they've decided this isn't for them right now, or they don't want that in their inbox. And you really just have to commit to the process. I had someone recently, I was on a call with her. She was actually, we were connecting for the first time, and she said, well, my people don't want a lot of emails. They've told me they don't want a lot of emails. And
I was like,
who said they do? Who's like, please send me emails all the time. Exactly. Yeah. So everything that you've talked about so far shows that you are a very strategy driven person. There is no like on a wing and a prayer. First of all, have you ever taken the Clifton Strengths Finders?
You were talking about that, and I took it in my corporate job, and I'm going to have to go back and look at what it was. I know relationships was the big one for me, which was like a positive. I can't remember what the one was where I needed support. I did take it, but I can't remember.
Because there's, I guess, like the four big like quadrants are strategy, execution, influence, and relationships. And I was wondering if you were like,
I actually think influence, which is ironic because of social media influencer, was maybe my lower one. Like, I don't want to be the one that like people think of as an influencer, but I would argue as a business owner that probably is you.
Yeah,
so,
mine, I ranked the highest in influence as well, which I kind of was second guessing myself. I'm like, well, shouldn't it be relationships? I'm selling and all these things. But when you actually look at what influence is, there is a lot of like activating people to move, and that's what we do. But anyway, you're obviously have a really great strategic brain, and I know enough about you that this is really where your career started. So let's like take it back to Holly before entrepreneurship. What did you do?
So I worked for the big 5 consulting firms. I worked for Accenture, if you're in the corporate world, and traveled around the country as, I would just call it like a program manager. So I was running really large teams, really large budgets, and we were in charge of really large projects. And I did that for 22 years. And at the end of my career was working for a nonprofit because I realized that the consulting world was maybe not the best schedule for raising young kids. Because I think 50-hour work weeks is like the low end. And so I was still doing the same thing, but was working for a local nonprofit. And a lot of my projects were really built on customer experience, which I loved because you'll see it in my strategy when I teach it. You see it like with my email list and things that we've talked about. Like, I'm a huge believer in the experience that people get when they work with you and talk with you, because it leads to just a longer relationship. And so when I left my corporate career, I was working for a nonprofit, and then we decided as a family that we were going to try it for 1 year. Or 3 years in. So that's exciting. We're still here. And just see what it looks like. So the interesting thing for us, though, is my husband was a principal, and when we had our girls, decided to stay home with the girls because newborn twins in daycare is like more than our mortgage. And so we were already a one-income family, and so having to take that leap was like really scary. It makes me nervous just talking about it. I can't believe I did that.
So did you work your consulting job and start your business concurrently for how long was that you did both?
2 years. So 2022 is when I left my corporate job. We started the business in 2020. Now, I will say working. Well, yeah, it was in the middle of the pandemic.
Right.
Like there was a lot going on. Like there was not a lot of free time. So I was not making my corporate salary when I left. I feel like we just got to the point where it was like, now is the time where we have to try this. And we had a plan for a year. My biggest piece of advice is like, don't quit your job and then know that there's no plan at all if you don't bring in any income, because I did not want to leave my job and wake up like on January 1st and be like, oh my gosh, I have to bring in $10,000 this month. Like I did not want to live in this like fear of money. And so we came up with a plan where like if the business did nothing, we would be fine for a year. And by fine, I mean like we're not doing crazy things. Like we made adjustments in other areas and then we would reassess it after a year.
So you did that you worked both for 2 years. When you started in 2020, were you someone that had a social media presence? Like, did you have kind of a following of people that you could start selling to, or how did you begin?
Yeah, so I dabbled in network marketing a little bit. If you look at my old account, you'll see some like stupid workout pictures.
I can relate.
I really need to take this down. I was like kind of successful, but not, I don't know, not really. And so it was like, I knew that this thing existed, but I really didn't. So I don't feel like got started until 2020. I had a Facebook account. I barely had an Instagram account. I did not have a website. I did not have a podcast. Like we were starting from scratch. And I actually joined a mastermind before I started my business because I knew that I wanted to build something. I wasn't 100% sure at the beginning. I thought I wanted to be like a productivity coach because everyone kept asking me like, how are you doing this? Like, how are you like raising twins and starting a business? And so I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll just teach that. That was really scary because I wasn't bringing in any income, but I knew that I could trust myself if somebody told me what to do. And so I literally just did every single thing that I was taught to do in this group. And thankfully it was a really good group. And then that's where the podcast came from. We eventually launched a course. The course was not great. And then from the course, we went into launching a mastermind, which is now we call it our co-op. Because I knew that selling a $150 course to a small audience of like 5 people was not going to cut it. Like I was already paying for a mastermind and now a podcast. And it was like, okay, I have to figure out a different way. And I like teaching. And so it was just a better model for us. And that's when things really shifted quite a bit, is when we started our high ticket program and then built back.
What would you say the difference of selling a $150 course versus a high ticket mastermind is?
That's a great question. I actually think it's
that's
easier.
What I was hoping you would say.
And I don't know why, because we do have a couple of low ticket offers, but it's just, I don't know. Like I have no problem with the price of what we're charging for things when I know like what is going into it and what we're giving and what we're bringing. And so I feel really confident in it. And it's relationships. Like I would rather get on a call with somebody for a high ticket program knowing that like I will literally be in your back pocket for as long as you want me than like a $17 whatever thing. So I actually like it better.
I think it's hard with that lower ticket thing for the boundaries because we were talking about this before we began also, like you want to make sure if someone's giving you even $1, they are getting the value of their dollar. But what is the value of a dollar? And so I at least tend to over deliver on the low ticket.
Yeah.
And then a lot of your time is spent in the low ticket versus when it is that somebody is handing you thousands of dollars, you're like, I'm all in, I'm yours. And you can over deliver without feeling like you're not putting your time in the right spot, for sure.
Yeah. And I think it depends on like, what are your goals and how much time do you have and what model do you want to build? But for us, flipping the model to start high ticket first and work down worked a lot better. And
so now your husband kind of partners with you on the business, right? What has that been like?
Yeah. Well, when you leave your job and you know that like you got to figure it out, we were like, it's going to be better if we work on this together than if we do it separately. And so, I mean, it's probably not a surprise that we have a very strategic plan that we follow, but we do quarterly meetings. So we meet quarterly and we go through like, what are our family goals first? And then, what do our launches look like? Like we don't want to launch something over our kids' spring break and like, where do we want to travel? What does that look like? And so we do that quarterly, and then we meet every Monday morning, sometimes Sunday evening, depending on what's going on, and go through like what's happening in the business. What does your schedule look like? Kind of thing. He does a lot of our finances. So, sort of just keeping all of that on track, taxes, all of that. We have a quarterly planner. So that's like more product based. He takes care of all of that and shipping. And then I would recommend this to anyone. He does all of our support emails, which was a huge change, especially when it comes to like billing questions and password questions and where to find this. So that like all goes to him, which has been really nice because it just takes me out of the equation. And I don't want to say don't have to worry about it because we talk about it, but it's nice that I don't have to do that. He's also a big numbers person. So like when we're in launches, like he'll go into our email service provider, we ConvertKit, and he'll like look at the stats and like who's checking on things and how many people watch the replay. And it's just nice to have that like support in the background.
That is key, and that is why Brian and I cannot do it. We are too similar in like both of us are the visionary and the talker and like want to be the front of the business. Neither of us want to be the behind the scenes business, and you need that in a good partnership. And I feel you too on the support email. I have someone that does all of the hours as well. And it just helps you as a business owner keep your head where it needs to be. So speaking of that, what else or who else is involved on your team?
Yeah, so we have a website team and they're on retainer and they just make changes for us as we need it. That was like a huge, like just taking the technical piece. I'm actually super technical and I think that's hard for me because I can do it, but it's nice to not have to. We have a podcast team, so they do like our editing and we'll repurpose a lot of things. I have a community manager and a BA. She's sort of in one role. We have a membership, so she sort of helps run that. And then she does a lot of our content repurposing, kind of going back to that anti-social strategy. So she does that pretty consistently every single week and just making sure that that whole formula gets applied. So the only thing that I have to worry about is our podcast, which is where our content comes from. And then I have a copywriter, and the copywriter was I'm so protective over our email list. And I was like, I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know how this is going to work, but if you find the right one. And so that's been really fun because we brainstorm quite a bit. Like I would say she's like part strategy, part copywriter, but it's been nice to like have me say things and then have her be able to put it in a way that
so she's writing the emails, you're giving her topics and she's writing.
She writes half of them. I'm super protective of it. So she does 2 of the 3 emails a week, and then she does all of our like sales pages and website pages, and we have a lot of funnels in the background, and so we're always like making changes to those and updating those, and so she does a lot of that work.
How did you get to the point where you were ready to outsource, or you felt like it was time to outsource? So you said 2022, you left the corporate job. Did you build the team right then, or has it been gradual?
It's been super gradual. So the first person that I hired, which I think most people would recommend would be like a BA type person. My person, her name's Caitlin. She's been with me since 2020. I hired her way before I needed her, but it kind of came back to that strategy we were talking about of I needed to be more visible and I knew it wasn't social. So I hired her to repurpose our content. So the content plan is actually the thing that I came up with first. The second person was the podcast team because it just takes me hours. I mean, there's so many cool tools now that we didn't have in 2020, but it just takes a lot of time. And our podcast is like the hub of all of our content. Like I always say it, even if no one listened, I would still do it because it creates so much content for us. And then I have so much to choose from. So we started there for a really long time. And then I left my corporate job, still same team. And then we added on the website team in 2023 and the copywriter in 2023. And that was just more because I wanted to build things, which I feel like I'm in that phase now. Like I want to build things. And so I knew that I had to keep everything else running while I gave myself space to do that. So it was slowly over time.
Here. The podcast team, we have the same one, Philip and Kate. Shout out Philip and Kate.
Yeah, I
they're
forgot about
amazing. They're
that.
amazing.
Yes, I love
Okay, so
Haynes.
as we're kind of winding down here, your podcast is called Crush the Rush. I have a background in network marketing, and that is all about, well, I don't want to make a blanket statement, but my experience, it was like hustle harder, hustle harder. My success was built on hustling.
Yeah.
So when I started Acorn,
Yeah.
I was like, I can't do that. I can't live like that anymore. So why don't you take us through, like, what is a typical day like for you, Holly? You obviously have a really impressive business with a lot of strategy, a lot of systems, a team. What does it look like on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, if you're listening, my day now does not look like it did in 2020 or 2021 when I was building. It was very different. And for the most part, I worked on my business from 6 to 8 a.m. because it was the only time that I had time to do that. So I just want to say that because it's different now. I have a lot of rules, actually. So for the most part, I don't take calls until 10 a.m. mainly because I just like love a morning where I can get my own stuff done. So it doesn't mean that I'm like not up early and all the things, but usually I don't have calls until 10 and they're usually done at 2. So I have this like super
I do
small
exactly
window.
the same thing.
Yeah, well, it's just because I want to be present when my girls are home and things like that. I do theme days, which maybe you've gotten to know me over this podcast, won't surprise you. So typically Mondays is just my day. I tend not to have meetings, and then I will have our co-op, which is like our mastermind. We do office hours or anything that I need to like get through the week. I'll do on Mondays. Today is podcast day, so I will batch certain things during this time. So I have 2 podcast interviews. This week's a little different because it's a launch, but for the most part, one day a week is all podcasting. Another day a week is all content. And then I try to bookend my days, Mondays and Fridays, where I don't have calls. It's really hard to do that. And it's taken me a minute to set those boundaries, but I find that I can be so much more creative and so much more responsive to my clients if I can do that. So that's kind of what it looks like. I mean, I get up, I do Pilates. I'm horrible at meditating. I'm trying to write in a journal. I get my girls on the bus, and then I'll usually have calls from 10 to 2. Sometimes I'll work in the afternoon, depending on what's going on. But I'm trying really hard to have the evenings free because I feel like I worked a really long time to get that.
Yeah.
So,
It's so funny. I pretty much run exactly the same schedule. Mondays and Fridays, I feel like, are really good bookends. To Monday gives you time to get all those things done, and then Friday, my rule used to be on Fridays, like, you have to leave the house and you have to go meet someone in person. Yeah, because
I love that.
it's so easy to just be by yourself all the time. Or Brian, my husband, works at home too.
Yeah.
But some days I'm like, it's just, all I'm doing is talking on a computer to someone and talking to you. I'm not seeing people in person. I've fallen out of that a little bit, but it was a really good rule. I should probably get back to it now that I'm saying it out loud.
Yeah. I mean, I talked about this, I can't remember, maybe it was yesterday or the day before. I run in seasons for the most part. So like winter season, I tried this year to lean into more of a relaxed season. When we're recording this, it's March, so we're like, I can feel things speeding up a little bit, but it's intentional because I know in the summer our schedules are going to be different and it's going to be a little bit slower. It'll speed up again in the fall. So maybe in the fall or the spring, like I will have a call on Friday, but I still am super protective. I just find the more white space I have, I'm just a better person.
Absolutely. Well, and running a business requires so much of your creative energy and your like internal motivation. And when you're a coach and when you're helping other people, your mind is on their business all the time. And so you really do have to intentionally build in those. Now my mind's on my own business. So what am I my own business for sure. So this was amazing. I really love chatting with you. Tell everybody what is the best way to connect with you and what's the best way to get some kind of like easy free resource from you.
Yeah, so I'm going to point you guys to our Ditch the Social Drama framework. It is a favorite. You can just go to hollymariehaynes.com/social. It's a private podcast. You can listen. You're going to see all the emails that we talked about come through. You'll get like the newsletter, the hand raiser, the client testimonial. So you can follow along, create the folder, save the ones that you like. And yeah, come listen to the
Yes,
Crush
we'll link all of that in the show notes. I did your private podcast and I get your emails and they're fantastic. So highly recommend doing that. And the private podcast is great. If you are listening and you're like, gosh, I don't want to have to rely on social media for my leads, Holly is your girl. So thanks again, Holly, for